All right, today I want to finish up Unit 4. I'm going to try to finish it today. If there's a little leftovers, we'll do it on Thursday. Our program works. It saves, it updates, it deletes. All cool, but it has these UX, user experience issues. At least in my mind, it has these issues. And first and foremost is that the buttons are always available, even when they shouldn't be. Why would I hit save if I haven't made any changes? Why would I hit cancel if I haven't made any changes? Once I have made changes, I shouldn't be able to change records until I save. All right, so what we're going to do is write some code that enables and disables the buttons and the grid and the search box on the form if they're not appropriate. So the first thing we're going to do is enable and disable the new, cancel, save, and delete buttons, and then we'll add the rest of that to it. The new button should be disabled whenever I'm changing a record. And once I've saved my records, then it should come back. Right? Shouldn't be able to hit new in the middle of an update. The save button should light up when changes have happened. The cancel button should always go with its friend, the save button. And finally, the delete button, the only time the delete button should go away is if there's nothing in the grid. I should be able to delete a record if I'm editing it. Remember, we wrote code so that if we say delete on a new record, it cancels it. If we're editing an existing record, we make some changes and go, oh, this is the one I was supposed to delete. We shouldn't make them cancel or save first just so they can delete it. So the delete button basically works and is displayed all the time unless there's nothing in the grid. If the grid is empty because we filtered it, remember my example last week was I did a double X search and it's not there. The grid empties. At that point, there's nothing to delete. The delete button should not be lit. Other than that, it should always be there. Then once we get those taken care of, we'll deal with the grid and the search box. How do we do this? Disabling, enabling buttons needs to happen from a number of different places. Whenever the user changes something on the form, I need to change the buttons. When the user hits save or cancel, I need to change the buttons. When the user hits new, I need to change the button. So all over this place, I've got button changing that needs to happen. So what I'm going to recommend we do is write a method. And instead of trying to read it and figure out what's going on, let's just build it again. This is a custom method. This is part of my form. All of this user experience stuff is the form. The business class has very little to do with the user experience except for validating data. And remember, the business class also has error messages in it. And so those get displayed to the user. If they're misspelled or confusing or too technical, then that's part of the user experience. But most of the user experience, how easy is my program to use, comes from the GUI. So this method, I'm going to call it enable buttons. And I'm going to call it from a bunch of places. Again, it's a method. It's kind of like one of those experts. Okay. I hired Trevor to be in charge of buttons. Trevor needs one piece of information. The save button, do you want it lit up or not? As it turns out, every button is related. When I do this toggling of buttons, every button is related to the save button. If the save button is lit, the cancel button is lit. That's what this says, right? If the save button is lit, then the cancel button is lit. Everybody else is the opposite. The new button is the opposite. That's not. The grid is opposite. The search is opposite. All 5 of those things that we want to enable, disable are related to the save button. So whenever I call Trevor, I'm going to tell him I want you to turn on the save button, or I'm going to tell him I want you to turn off the save button. This is my design for this. If you want to, I've had a number of students in the past say, I don't like the name, I don't like the way it works. If you want to redesign it, go for it. I would suggest you have me look it over before you submit it just to make sure I agree that it's not wrong. So this goes into, let's collapse stuff here. I'm always surprised at how many of you like to scroll 100 times. goes in here. This is private because it belongs to the GUI. It doesn't return anything, not to whoever calls it. It just does its job. I call Trevor and he turns on the buttons or turns off the buttons and he says, I'm done. I go, cool. Enable buttons is my name. And then I need to send this method a Boolean value that I will call enable save. So enable save is either going to be true, turn the save button on, or it's going to be false, turn the save button off. Steal the description. Let's see if I can steal it from here. Cool. I'm always amazed when I can cut stuff from the Mac and paste it into Windows Virtual Machine. Works good. That's Fusion, by the way, lets you do that. So this method enables or disables the form buttons, the selection grid, and the search box based on this enable saved. So first things first, my button save enabled, notice I'm not hiding them, I'm just disabling them, is equal to whatever enable save says I should make it. So when I call Trevor and I say true, he sets the save button enabled to true, so save is now live. I could call him later and say false, turn it off again. And save button goes that way. As we said before, the cancel button is exactly the opposite. Or, I'm sorry, it's always exactly the same as save. When save is lit up, cancel is lit up. If save is not available, cancel is not available. So I set that to the same value. Button new, the grid, and the search are always the opposite of that. So if the save button is on, that means I've made some changes. The grid should be off, the search box should be off, and I can't add a new button. I can't add a new record. Those should be off. So they're always the opposite of that. So button new dot enabled equals not enable save. The grid can also be disabled. And finally, the search box. I don't want the user searching for a new record because whenever you search, it changes the existing record. Even if the grid's disabled, it still makes the grid hide behind the scenes or work behind the scenes. So I want to make sure that my search box is also disabled when we start. So those are always exactly the opposite. And finally, button delete is only dependent on rows in the grid. So I believe this says if the current row is not null, or we're inserting a new record, then we enable this. So if we've got rows, or the grid is blank and I'm inserting a new record, remember the delete lets me cancel that new record that I'm creating. So that's why it's a little more complicated, but not too much. So down here again, button delete, dot enabled. It's enabled as long as the grid select is a current row. Yep. That basically says, are there any rows in the grid? If there's one in there, it's always selected. If there's 10 in there, there's always one selected. So if there are no current row in the grid, it means there aren't any. But there is a special circumstance where we're inserting a record. Remember that variable we set in part 5. Done. If the row is not null, that's true. Or we're inserting a record, that's true. If either one of those is true, then the delete button is enabled. Might make a little more sense when we run it. This describes it as well. So when do we change the status of the buttons? whenever the user clicks a new button, we set enable buttons to true. So here's button new. So I'm going to display the record, and after I'm done displaying the record, I'm going to call this method enable buttons, and I'm saying it's new. This is a new record. We just cleared the screen. The user needs to be able to save, and the user needs to be able to cancel. So turn the save button on. That's one place. Where else? Enable buttons false when we hit save. Okay, so here's save. After we're done and everything is cool, then we call the same function, but this time we say make the save button false because we just saved. We're done saving. Right? Make the save button false. What else? In grid select changed. Grid select change. Set it to false. And the reason we need to do that is not so much because we changed rows in the grid. It's because when we hit cancel, we want to set those false or delete. What did I do in button cancel? It handles both. All right, what I used to do in the past is in button cancel, I would say set the buttons to off. In button delete, if I just deleted a record, set the buttons to off in two different places. What one bright student one year said is, wait a minute, whenever we do these, there's a grid select remove, there's a delete, there's a display, they all get changed in grid select changed. So why don't we just put it in there to simplify? Okay. So in here, after I'm done displaying my record, I once again say enable buttons false. Otherwise, I could move this one command into those two methods and repeat it, and that's fine too. It would work. It just saves me a little bit of code. I've often wondered at this, if I was a maintenance programmer, I might be looking up here at this delete or this cancel record and say, why isn't he turning the buttons back off again? Maybe it's better in here. I don't know. The question is, does it work? Did we get them all? Enable buttons in the grid, enable buttons true. Whenever the user changes the value of any field. Whoa. That one's a little more complicated. So let's first test this. What should happen here? When I run my program, I'm going to display the first record, but I haven't changed it. So what I expect to see is the save button and the cancel button turned off. Because remember from our previous examples, when we load the form, this grid select changed happens over and over and over again, three times. The last time it happens, it should turn the save and cancel buttons off. This is one of the last things that occurs. So that's what I expect. Thank you. Okay, now look at the buttons. Save button, cancel button are off. The new button, the delete button, is on. The grid is available. The search box is available. The only other thing I can test right now, well, no, I can test a few more things. Let's find out. If I hit new, we said turn the save and cancel buttons on. Notice as soon as I hit new, the new button is now off. I'm already in a new button record. I can't add another new record. That makes sense. I could try to save this, but all the validation will go, wait, it's not done yet. Notice my search box is disabled and my grid is disabled. All of that because we said when you click on button new, tell Trevor to turn on the save button and the cancel button, which then also he in the background says, but I guess you don't want the grid or the text box or the new button then, do you? Save, unless I enter a bunch of data, doesn't tell me much. Cancel. You sure? Yeah. Now they hit the cancel button. Now we're back to this record, and these two are disabled again. This one comes back. That one's still enabled. If I hit new and then delete this new record, that does basically a cancel. And so we're back to this state again. And now my form is going to prevent the user from navigating when they make changes, except for one thing. If I add sausage to this pizza, I can't save it. That's not good. If I change the date, I can't save it. The name, and you get the idea. I can't change anything and save it because my form right now is not smart enough to say, you change something, I should turn the save button on. It's not that smart yet. But it does come up well when we start the program. It does handle new, it handles cancel, it handles delete. What it doesn't handle is data of an existing record changing. And as it turns out, that's the complicated part. Back to here. How are we going to know? There's all kinds of stuff on that form. There's text boxes and radio buttons and check boxes and date pickers and numeric up downs and whatever else you got on your form. How do we know when they change? Well, this is tedious. Some of you might say it's even a little anal. Why don't we just leave the save button on all the time? Who cares if they hit save and there's no changes made? Who cares really if they hit cancel and they haven't made any changes? It's a good argument. But I think it adds professional touch. And it's nice to know how to do it. Might come in handy. So what we want to do is sense whenever a text box is changed. The event, there is an event that occurs called text changed event. When the date picker changes, there is a value changed event. Combo boxes, we can use text changed as well. Because whenever you pick something new in a combo box, the text changes. If the user types in a combo box, the text changes. For list boxes, if you pick a different item on the list, the selected index changes. Radio buttons and check boxes, we already know about the check changed event. What we could do inside of those is simply tell each one of these events, and each one of these, each one of them, we could tell it to simply turn on the radio buttons. So let's start with that. According to my notes here, it says, whenever the date picker changes, call the changed event. Okay. Let's start with that. Here's my date picker. I want to create a new event. Sluggish today. I want to create a new event, please. I'm not getting any properties here. There we go. New event. And according to my notes, it's the value changed event. There it is. To change or to create this event, the easy way to do it is just double click it. Puts it in a goofy spot alphabetically, so I'm going to cut it from there. And it's a DTP, and this is not validation. This is a changed event. So I'm going to sneak it in up here under my other events. I've had some students in the past create changed event, a changed event region. You can do that. Put them all in the same place. This method hides, no, it actually, yeah, it displays, or enables, that's better, enables save and cancel buttons when the date is changed. That's a little incomplete, but I will finish that. Inside here, I just want to say enable buttons true. If the date changed, turn the save button on and all of its friends in correlation. Okay, do all that stuff. Let's see if that works. Instantaneously, save button, cancel button, new button's gone, delete button's still here. These are disabled. I can't leave until I save or cancel. Can't do it anymore. Search, disabled. But here's kind of a kicker. What if I do this? That's the same date it was when we started. It's still lit up. So, well, I'm anal. It's the same as it was when I started. Shouldn't these buttons turn off? I think so. It'd be a cool little feature, so let's make that happen. But what if it puts it back? How do I sense that the user put the data back the way it was when we started? And remember, we got a whole blooming form here that could be changed, little pieces, parts, and at some point I put it back. What we're going to do here is define a variable, just like we did with the org keys. Remember in the business class when we were looking for duplicates? We wanted to know what were the original key values when I brought this data in. We're going to use the same technique here. We're going to create a variable called org record, and it is going to store everything on the form as it was when we came in, when we originated this record. So up here, I'm going to create a new variable. Private, it's a string, org record. These are the data values concatenated of the record when initially shown. Should put some typos in there. You guys are getting real good at copying my stuff. It's okay. Keep copying. So here's my org record. Now what I want to do is take this and this and these and those and this and this and this and this and this, every one of those, and concatenate them into one big old long string. And I want to do that every time anything on the form changes. Remember keys now? We created a method called keys now that did that work for us. We want to do the same thing here. I'm going to call it record state. What is the current state of the record? That's another new method. So it alphabetically goes here. It returns a string called, and the method's name is record state. I don't have to send it anything. It's going to look on the form and see what the current values are. This method concatenates all current form data into one string. And whenever I want to know, what is it now, I just call record state. What is it now? What is it now? What is it now? I just call record state over and over and over again. It's complaining at me because I said I was going to return something and I haven't done so yet. I'm going to create a string variable that's equal to combined, and I'm going to call it combined. And I think I'll initialize it to the empty string. And when I'm done, I'm going to return that. So this string variable is going to combine all that stuff on my form. So initially, and I don't know that I need to initialize it now that I think about it. Pull that out. Initially, I'm going to say that combined is equal to my date picker value. And I think I'll just turn it into a short date string. Still have to get its value then to short date string. That will give me a relatively readable date. And I want to concatenate to that whatever's in my text box, or is a combo box. It is a combo box for the customer name. And again, for readability, I think I'm going to take the text. I could just simply grab the selected value, but I'm going to take the text to make it a little easier to read. TX or CMB customer.text. And then concatenate to that, the radio buttons. That's kind of hard, because how do I know which one of these is lit up? I'm going to have to use a case statement. Okay, so let's skip that for now, jump ahead to the checkboxes. I'm going to concatenate every one of the checkboxes. So check pepperoni.checked. I can concatenate a Boolean to a string. Yes. You get a false or a true. And add to that the check sausage.checked. And add to that the check mushrooms. Isn't there an easier way to do this? I don't think so. I haven't found it yet. But the good news is I only have to type this once. And then we got onions.checked and green peppers.checked. Okay, so that takes care of my checkboxes. What? What did I do? The designer cannot process a text integer key press. Why? Makes no sense, just because that thing is concatenating. All right, and now I can't look at the form. That's annoying. Oh, there's an extra curly bracket. I don't know where that came from. Did things get moved around here maybe? You happy now? Good. All right, numeric up down. We'll grab its value. Then soda has a value. Cheese sticks has a text box. They have text boxes. Okay, so numeric up down numpys.value. And then the soda text. The cheese sticks text. And what was the last one? Coupon. So all I've done here is taken everything on the form and smushed it together in one big ugly string. Except very good. Except the radio buttons. So I just need to deal with the radio buttons. How can I deal with the radio buttons? I got to figure out which one's checked. Does that work? We'll see. Nope. Why not? Can't use, my guess is I cannot use a checked property here as my value to compare against the true. So I need to come up with a different solution, and I'm going back to programming logic beginning, unit 5. Unit 5, we learned about checkboxes and if statements, and we learned how we can, in our RDO check changed event, which I already have. I think it's hiding in here. What is going on? Oh, there's an error, so I can't collapse, really? There. Okay, here's my RDO. Here we transferred the RDO text to AndOrder.size. Took the text box off the radio button, the text property off the radio button, and transferred it to the business class. I could take whatever's in the business class and concatenate it, because as soon as I check a radio button, this will change what's in the business class. It happens immediately. I could. But then I've got part of what I'm concatenating in the business class and part of what I'm concatenating on my form, and I don't know if that's so great. So what I'm going to do is, again, go back to Unit 5 and say I need a private variable that is going to be a string called last size or selected size. Sound familiar? Vaguely? Last selected size radio button. And then down here, in addition to setting the text, in addition to doing this, I'm also going to set that time. Selected size equals RDO.text. So now I'm putting this in two different places. One in the business class, one in the GUI. The business class I need because I need to save it into the database. The GUI's part I need for my concatenation process here, so that was record state. And now I can just say concatenate that. And maybe I should put it in the right place because it comes on the form after the combo box. So here's where I put selected size. And that should concatenate everything on the form and send it back. To whoever asks. So when do I ask? I ask back here in my date picker. Remember my date picker, I said set the buttons on. Well, only if the data on the form has changed. If the data as a form has changed, you go ahead and turn the buttons on, but if for some reason the user put it back again, turn the buttons off. Oh. So now I need a little bit more logic here. Next, we're going to create another method called check to see if the record has changed. Check record changed. This is a Boolean method that returns either true or false. The record on the screen has changed or it hasn't. That slides into here. The Boolean. Notice how many of these methods I'm starting to write. Think about systems class where we talked about want to keep the number of methods low. But if it's reusable, we want to call it in multiple places, and I do. You want to define these things. Methods are a big part of programming. You're just starting to get comfortable with them. Wait till we get to JavaScript, or you get to JavaScript. Then there's going to be a bunch more. They're all over the place. Some of these event handlers, they're methods, but they handle events. Other methods just do things that we write code for. Check record changed. Should be able to, I'm guessing, steal this and use it verbatim. This method checks to see if the current details have changed. The details on the form have changed. How do we know if they've changed? If the current record, that's record state. We can call our friend record state that does all that concatenation. If the current state of the record is not equal to the original record, then we return true or return false. Wait a minute. Why don't we just say return whether or not they match? It may not be that simple. I seem to remember there's a little bit more in here. This will return either a true or false. If the current state of the record matches what it was when we came in, if it doesn't match, then the record has changed, true. If they do match, then this is false. And we return false. The record has not changed. Then I'm supposed to call that from here. Enable buttons with check record changed. Whoa. What did I just do there? I said, remember we do inside parentheses first, right? Call the expert who checks to see if the record has changed. Let's say that's Karen. Call her. Check record change. She's going to send me a true or false, right? She's going to look around and say, nope, everything's the same, false. Or she's going to look around and say, yes, the radio button's changed, true. And then immediately she sends that message to me, true or false, and I immediately pass it on to Trevor, who does things to the buttons to make them turn on or off. So we can nest these method calls. We've done it before. We can nest method calls. Call a method and immediately take the answer from that method and send it to the next method. So I'm calling Karen, taking her true or false, immediately sending to Trevor. Trevor turns on the save or the false button based on the information that Karen passed to me. If this is me, order, date, value changed is me. I am calling a couple of people who work for me. Karen, check to see if the record has changed. She says it has. Trevor, she says it has. Turn on the save button. Does it still work? The only thing I have coded right now is the date. So if I change the date, the button should now light up, and they do. But here's what's different. Now I'm going to put it back. Every time the date picker changes, I call Karen. She looks around and says, nope, everything's the same. Sends the false to Trevor. I send the false to Trevor, and he turns the button. Oh, why not? Hmm. I don't know. I didn't expect that. Because isn't that the date I started with? Yeah. 214, 214.12. That's the same date I started with. How come my buttons are still lit up? They honestly shouldn't be. So I need to look around here. And I have to take a look at my record state and see what's in combined. So I'm going to stop my program and run it. And here we are. What do you got? I got 428.15, false, 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 false. Oh, it's going to hit this a couple more times, I hope. 214.12, Aikman, false, 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 1. Where's my large? Where's my large? There's the selected size. It should be after his name. The selected size is none. Oh. I never set my original record. So I'm looking at the current record, all right, but what's my original record? When do I set that? Did my notes tell me? To implement this intelligence, we'll have to add some story. And by the way, notice the word intelligence here. Computers are stupid, right? Yes, but we make them look smart and look intelligent by writing code. So we're writing code. We have to store the original state of the record. Continue. The easiest way to do this is concatenate. Next, we'll call get record changed. Set the original record equal to the record state and display record and button save. Okay, that's the part I skipped. So here's display record. As soon as I get done showing it on the screen, remember display record is called every time we go to the database and get a new one. Here's what it is. Then we set the org record equal to whatever the current record state is. Let's see if that helps. Might still be a problem with the radio buttons, I'm not sure. Change it. Good. Change it back. There we go. That was the problem. Okay, so now it is sensed, Karen has sensed that I put it back. And before I forget, check record changed. Right here, that's Karen, right? She does her job. And then we take the answer that she gives me and I send it to Trevor and he turns on the buttons. But if we go look at check record changed real quick, notice that Karen calls another method. So I call her. And then she calls Matt and said, hey, Matt, what's the current state of the record? And he said, here's your string. She compares that to the original, sends me a true or false, which holy cow. We got 3 methods involved here. So what? Doesn't matter. Because each of them has their job to do. Matt's the expert on concatenating everything on my form. Why would I want to give that to Karen? I could. But Matt concatenates everything together. Karen compares that to this, sends a true to me, which I send to Trevor, and he does the button stuff. And it seems to be working. This also says we need to do it in button save. So when we're done saving, in addition to enabling the buttons, we also have to determine a new org record state, because we may have changed a bunch of stuff on the form. Now that we've saved it into the database, this is the new original. So we're changing the original here to be equal to the record state. So let's test that and run it. I change it to medium. Oops, change the date. That's all I got written so far. Change the date. And you know what? Let's make it the 15th instead. That way you kind of see it at the top. And now my buttons are on. That's good. And I can save it. Save. Get rid of that. Go. And it saved my changes. And there we go. But now if I change the date, notice the buttons are back off again. So that's good. If I change the date back to the 14th, now my buttons light up. Because when you hit save, it creates a new starting point, the new original record after you hit save. And I can cancel and do all the stuff. That seems to work. I'm going to save that back to what it was just because it flashed at me. That's fine. So those are the 2 places. When we first display the record out of the database, we capture its original state. If the user makes a bunch of changes and saves it again, we capture its new original state. So if we make additional changes, we can sense those with the save button. So that works well for the date picker. This whole thing seems to be working. So now what I need to do is also start sensing these other things changing. Sense if anything else has changed. So let's start with the radio buttons. Every time a radio button changes, where are you? It's in the class. Let's try this one. We need to check to see if the record has changed and we need to turn the lights on. Where's my RDO change? Under R. Come on. Oh, data transfer. Scared me there for a second. Here's the RDO. And no matter what happens, if it's checked or unchecked, what I'm going to do is say, nah, you know what, change my mind. I'm going to do it as long as we actually changed it and everything's cool. I'm going to say check record changed. Notice from now on, whenever I want to see if my record has changed, I call check record changed. I think my logic is wrong. Check record changed, sends true or false. which needs to be sent to enable buttons. I think check record changed is not Boolean. Check record change, compare the current state. Okay, check, I'm sorry. See why I want to record it in the 4 o'clock class instead of the 1 o'clock class. I have an error. It's not an error. But when I call check record changed, this never calls enable buttons. What I'm going to do is chain Trevor and Karen together here. I'm going to call Karen and say, check the records changed. And by the way, you are also responsible for turning the buttons on. She's going, oh, I'm not, that's Trevor's job. She's going to call him. So this is not a Boolean function anymore. It is a void function, means it doesn't return anything. And what she does is she calls enable buttons with this. She calls him directly. And so now up here in my date picker, the date picker doesn't call enable buttons. It just calls check record changed. So now whenever anything changes, all I do is call Karen. And Karen checks to see if the form is the same and sends the information to Trevor so that he turns on the buttons appropriately. And now the same thing down here in my radio buttons. I think I already did it. Yep. So let's see if that works. And again, most of that code you're going to be able to just steal. So the fact I did it wrong the first time shouldn't matter too much. I want the save button to light up. It did. Good. I'm going to put it back. Cool. I'm going to change sizes. Put it back. Genius. Oh, magic. Even cooler, change the date and the size. Fine. And yes, this is telling Trevor turn the buttons on, and he's turning them on and they're already on. That doesn't matter. There's no way around that. And how long does it take him to do that? Billionths of a second. So that's all right. Don't want him to get bored back there. But now if I put it back, it was a personal pizza on the 14th. Oh. Magic. Genius. Now we need to do the same thing for checkboxes. And watch how hard this is. Every time a checkbox changes state, call check record change. So by creating my methods, it makes the rest of this process easy because everybody calls Karen. Buttons. Gone again. Turn them on and off in any order you want when you put them. Oh, cool. Combo boxes. Text boxes. Do we have any text boxes? Yeah, we got some text boxes. Remember from my notes, I said that combo boxes and text boxes both go to text changed events. So I'm going to create a text changed event. I'm going to wire everybody to it because they're all going to do the same thing. They're going to call Karen. So I'm going to start with the combo box text changed event. I'm going to do this and then we'll take our break. So here's the combo box. I want to create a text changed event. I'm immediately going to change the name because I already know that there's 2 combo boxes. There's also a couple of text boxes and they're all coming here. I'm just going to do this. I've never come up with a really good name for this because I put them all together. If any text box's text is changed, call check record changed. Call Karen. That's in the wrong spot. Belongs under the T's, but not in the validating. TE would go here. Darn, missed. And now, before I leave, I want to wire everybody else to that. This one, and this one. Oops, wrong program. That one, that one. Can do them all at once. And that should cover just about everybody. Did I copy it? Oops. Buttons are on. It used to be Eve Beaupre, so let's go find them again. Cool. Now this one, Diet Cola to Cola, changed. Back to Diet Cola, changed. Cheese sticks, 51, 50, $4.05, $4. Cool. The only one that's left is the numeric up-down. It has a value property. So does my date picker. Could I combine them? I think so. Probably should change the name if I do that. So here's my date picker value changed. I'll call it any values. Value has changed. And then I'm going to wire my numeric up down to that. The only reason I changed this name is because I want to put two things attached to it, and I don't want it to be called DTP when something else is referring to it. And so that's another value changed event. Here it is. Wire that up to any value changed. And now let's see what happens when I change the number. Cool. You want to see really anal? What was the original coupon value? $4. Isn't that $4? Isn't it the same? Stupid program. Yeah, but it's looking at the text, right? And text doesn't have dollar signs. It doesn't have two decimal places. Not until I type the dollar sign at the beginning does it go, oh, no. We can't have that. So after break, we're going to fix that. The problem here is that who's checking the record? I think that was Matt who was sticking all the things together. He's looking at the current value, but he's looking at a potentially differently formatted value. So we're going to make him a little smarter. When you come back, let's take 10.